Okay, welcome to the nmon or njmon user meeting. This is user meeting number 4. You've got my contact details down the bottom in here. Now, we typically don't have many people appearing for the actual live of this user meeting, but we did get plenty of replays. Out of the first 3 meetings, we've had 600 people watch the replay. So it is of some value, I hope. And so we'll carry on doing these for a while yet. This is the first chart I've shown for each of these user meetings. I won't go through it in quite so much detail as the 4th time, because you can look at the previous replays and let me explain what's going on. But I'm hoping that you understand that we capture stats from AIX and Linux and the virtual IO server. That's the virtualization of devices on the power servers. It runs the VOS. We collect that data in InfluxDB and we graph it with Grafana, both open source tools that are very popular. And we can use the same data in the JSON format in Elasticsearch or ELK, whatever they're calling it this week, or Splunk. And we can also get that data in Line Protocol into Prometheus if those are the time series databases that you're particularly interested in. And we collect a lot of stats, far more than the other data collectors, particularly when you're looking at Linux. We're talking about 1,000 stats out of your operating system. Also, the numbers down here are a little bit old, but we have 10 videos, 2 hours and 20 minutes of, if you like, training that you can get on YouTube, and you'll know quite a lot about it and how to install it, how to get it running, how to create the graphs, and some of the more esoteric features that we had in the last year. Okay, now this time round, a recap from user meeting 3 about the host names of your computers, your virtual machines. Probably everybody's using virtual machines now. It's bad practice not to use the fully qualified domain name. So this will be the host name dot, probably your company name, and followed by .com. And then we have some people that are using the short name, but they have multiple virtual machines with the same name in different domains. So when the njmon reports the stats, it uses a tag so you can find the data for the actual host name. You have multiple machines with the same host name. So it has all sorts of data, but you can't actually separate the data to graph it sensibly for the 2 different virtual machines because they have the same name. So the idea was that we'd actually add an option to njmon. So instead of using the host equals and the tag being the short name, it's now the fully qualified domain name. Now, unfortunately, there's further problems with this because some people use the host name. For example, Nigel would be a host name. If somebody asks me my name isn't Nigel. My name is Nigel Griffiths. Excuse my wife for a minute. I'm sure she'll go out and shut the door. They also, which is not a good practice, right? They also, in their DNS servers, for each line of the machine, they have the IP address, and they put in here the short name followed by the full name, or fully qualified domain name. Then, of course, there's other aliases, and this name in here is an alias. This is the DNS host name, which again is a short name. So if in a program you look up the host name, it will tell you Nigel. If it then looks up the DNS host name, it will say it's Nigel. And then there's a list of aliases, one of which you hope is the fully qualified domain name. So this would be driving me nuts. I'm a little bit worried about this because if programs are trying to find the fully qualified domain name, they have to search the host names, then they have to search and talk to the DNS server to find out the name. Oh, it's another short name. Then they have to start working through a list of aliases and guessing which one of those are the host name. If this was Nigel Brill, Grulu, Mr. N1, and Nigel.Griffiths, they have to parse all of these to find out which one's got one or more dots in and assume that is the fully qualified domain name. And that's actually taking CPU time. And if it's doing this 100,000 times a second, that's probably wiping out 2 or 3 CPUs doing all this work again and again and again. Now, fortunately, they should be cached, but you get my point. This is not a good way of running your computer. Now, if you're in nmon and it's trying to talk directly to InfluxDB, it's going to use the hostname or get hostname command to get the hostname. That will end up with, you'll find no dots, so i.e. that's the short name. So then it does get host by name. This does a DNS lookup, and then it finds, oh, there's no dots in the command name, so this is a short one. So then I have to run the host -n command to find out what your fully qualified domain name is. And I'm using this command to look through all the aliases and guess which one it is. Okay, not ideal. Now, fortunately, nimon and njmon only does this once when it starts up, so it's not a big tax on every single data collection. It won't notice whether you actually change your host name while it's actually running, when you shouldn't be changing the host name of your servers anyway. If you're using njmon, then this hostname is extracted at the time of the injector, the njmon-d.python injector. So you have to change that Python program. It's in text in here, so you just change the hostname to full hostname, and that should work okay. In both cases, it's worth using. Well, no, they both actually work out the fully qualified hostname. If in nimon you use the -h, it will do the best job it can to find a proper hostname to actually supply that directly to InfluxDB. Now, another reminder from user meeting 3, because this is another feature. Oops, it came out too quickly there. I hit a return key or something. Yeah, last time around we looked at GPFS, or Spectrum Scale as it's now called, which is like an NS4 on steroids with masses of scaling and storage redundancy. Anyway, that's what it is all about. Since then, we've had a problem with it because a lot of people have GPFS and they're using it. That works fine. A lot of people use GPFS, they have it installed, but not running. Well, okay, that would be okay, but I can't find a clean way of spotting that condition. I mean, if it's not running, we can't gather the stats. And we actually call the stats gathering command, which is called mmon, which is odd. MM was the original, before it's called GPFS, name of the product. But that aborts badly. So I've had troubles actually spotting the fact that GPFS is apparently there because the command runs, but not actually working. So we tried harder with the brand new releases of njmon to get this right. If that still doesn't work for you, then if you specify a NOGPFS command line, a shell variable equals 1, and then you run the program, it will say, hang about, it doesn't want GPFS. We won't even look at seeing if it's there or running or the command's there. It will just switch that off dead in its tracks. Okay. So we're actually getting there. I don't know quite why this program aborts so badly, or why there isn't a simple tool to find out is it installed but not running, so we can switch off the stats. That's what we have at the moment. Now, there is a program I wrote in 2018 called nextract. You can tell it's a Nigel tool because it's got an N on the front, right? And this was pretty good. This just allowed us to extract data from the HMC. Now, it keeps a database of what's going on inside the HMC. If you switch it on for performance stats, then it will go to the HMC and flip an option to switch it on. Then it will start gathering stats about the servers, about the virtual I/O servers on the servers. VIO server is sort of like a server, built-in server piece of technology, although it's a separate LPAR, but it actually built into the server, and the HMC is very closely tied to the VIO server, asking the VIO server for information and telling the VIO servers to change settings. So it's like part of a built-in part of the server. It also keeps details, if you switched it on, about the LPARs that are on a particular server. So you can find, for a particular server, let's say it's called Alpha, it knows about the LPARs that are on that, so you can gather stats for the LPARs on that particular server. And it gets some stats from the actual LPAR itself. And that's regardless of the operating system in the LPAR. So that'll work for AIX, Linux, and IBM I. And also in here we have some temperatures and electricity, the watts. That only works for the scale-out machines, and there's some shared storage pool data in there that you can pull out. And you do all that via a REST API on the HMC. You can actually get a spreadsheet. It's a massive spreadsheet, and nobody knows how to read this and work out how to extract the data and graph it. So if you go with a REST API, it will supply some pretty ghastly XML files in the most complicated XML formats I've ever seen. And then if you carry on going down that, it will give you a list of JSON files that you can extract, and you can put on the JSON files. And Python 3 is pretty good at looking at XML and JSON files and dealing with that. So I wrote a package called nextract that gets all of that data. It took me 1,000 lines of code to work around the extremely weird formatting that you get out of the HMC. I learned a lot doing it, but there we go. We have a package now, and so there are other packages available on the internet that do this, but they seem to be going unsupported at the moment. So I wanted to refresh it and make sure it works, and particularly the server and the LPAR stats worked okay. Along with putting the data into InfluxDB. It did that in the past as well, but I've had a couple of little bugs. There were things like tags missing that we learned in the meantime, so I had to fix up those things to get it to graph the data. So we, with our Python program called nextract, which is actually a bunch of 4 or 5 little programs that you for the different sorts of data. The one we're using here is nextract server, as opposed to storage pools and temperatures or energy, and then it can save that data to comma separated files, comma separated values in a file, or it can push it straight into the database, or it can, I think, save JSON files as well. But in this case, we just want to put the data straight in the database. We don't want to manage lots of files to save it into a database, so it does that. Okay, and that can be the same InfluxDB, although you need a different database to put that in. So you'll have a database called njmon typically. I create one called nextract. Don't mix up the two sets of data because they're quite different sorts of data. You want to keep them separate. Okay, and then Grafana can talk to InfluxDB and get the data out of both of those. So you get a best of both worlds. You can get the data from the HMC and you can get the data from njmon. The nextract data of course, has IBM I, which is quite nice. It fills that gap that we have in our stats, and you can get a server view. Of course, we can do a server view apart from IBM I with njmon, but of course, if things are moving between machines all the time, we'll find that their serial number changes, and we can use that to find out where it is. When we're looking at the server view, it just tells you what's on this server during this period that you're looking at on your graph. So that's a pretty good move as well. And here's the sort of graphs. This is the server and VO server level graphs around in here. And on the same graph I've put in this case, because I've been here with selecting which server it is. It's a Power 8 or Power 9 server. And this is the LPARs and how much CPU they're using. We can see here, the light blues, the guy taking, the virtual machine that's taking most of the CPU. As one seems to be going along here all day long at the same rate. Oh, I can see that is Silver 2, and that's the one that's actually running. It's a bit self-referential here. This is the one that's running InfluxDB and Grafana. So okay, that makes sense. It's running all day long. These other ones tend to be a bit sort of my faked up workload. Then we have the LPAR stats. Well, if we go on for the LPAR stat. For the CPU, we have the virtual processor count. This is the maximum number of CPUs this virtual machine can stretch across. The entitlement and the used amount of CPU. So we can compare in here. The entitlements up in here is 2.4 or something in this case. and it can go up to normally when you hover over it, it will tell you what the numbers at the maximum is. This looks like 12 CPUs, and this is the actual amount you're using. We're going over entitlement in here. Perhaps you want to increase the entitlement to improve your efficiency. We have over here the LPAR memory. This is slightly suspect at the moment. I can't get the same numbers. Well, I got email about half an hour ago saying this is a dodge you can put in to get the actual values of memory coming out. Then for this LPAR, we have the disks of kilobytes per second going on here and IOs per second. And down in here with a network, I think this is in kilobytes now. This is a slightly old graph. And the network. So we got the kilobytes and the packets or disk blocks going in and out of your server. But I don't want to get your hopes up. That is all the data that the HMC is going to tell you about. And I think these disk and network numbers in here are virtual disks and virtual networks because they're getting this number off the IO server. If you have an adapter connected to your virtual machine, I don't think the stats will come out on here, but I could be wrong. It's just an impression. I guess I have to at one point set that up and prove that to myself, but be careful with that. If you've got adapters in here, they may not appear as the virtual disks and networks. Okay, on the server in here, it's just zoomed in the previous one. This is my server name in here. It's just our naming convention. A lot of customers have great big part numbers in here. And so you select which machine, and then it changes all the graphs in Grafana. So we have the CPU for the server and the memory for the server. This is configured memory. So in here is 100. No, not configured. Is oh right, it's all configured up in here, just below the total, I guess. And this is how much memory has been given to the LPARs. It doesn't tell you how much of the memory given to an LPAR that's actually in use. You have to drill down to the further details. Then over down below, this is effectively the server graph broken out to the individual CPU virtual machines in here, as I sort of covered before. And we can see in here the light blue one is this VM30. It's running SLES 12. I don't know why it's suddenly got busy. Oh, well, I do fake up some workloads, and you can see them all starting at the same time at 7:45 or something in the morning. Over here, then, this is the virtual IO CPU, just tickling along in here. It's not doing a lot of work on my machines. I guess I could sort of drive those up by flying some packets in and out, doing some FTP transfers across virtual networks. And we have the virtual memory of the virtual IO servers. I have two of them. You can see it's coming at is it 10? No, 10's up here. That's 9 gigabytes of memory to the 2 VIO servers. And in here we have what's happening on the fiber channel SAN switch of the SAN rather of the virtual IO server and the virtual networks. You can see the sort of symmetric picture in here of packets. All must be the same size, and so the two graphs look the same in my case. Again, this is all the data that we can get off the HMC. There's nothing extra that we're hiding and not showing you. Okay, so let's try again. So I have made some, here it says we, it's me, isn't it really? Made some assumptions, and I'm assuming that it's Power 8 and Power 9. We're not trying this on Power 7. I'm not sure if it works at all. We assume that you got the latest firmware on your Power 8 and Power 9 machines. We assume that you have the latest HMC software because there were problems in the early days with that. And that you're running the latest VIO server. The HMC is talking to the VIO server to get a lot of its data. And that these are all up and running and working well. Now, when we actually try it, we find typical problems in our infrastructure. And I just want to say, this is not my fault. Okay. All right. So the sort of problems we have is RSCT failures. This is the way the VIO server talks to the HMC. Well, that's not my fault. And the person that reported these, you just output what the nextract is reporting these errors to you. So they come out quite often, a lot of times. We've got a lot of LPARs. And I said, you really need to raise a PMR and get that sorted out. Asks for the VO server team how to fix this. I think actually you could find, Google this, and you have to restart the daemon. And if that doesn't work, then you really do need to sort that out, because if this isn't working, then you probably haven't got dynamic LPAR changes. You can't change the memory or the CPUs, and you certainly can't do live partition mobility. So you should get those sorted out. I found this one as well. SRIOV gets a complaint, and it won't supply the data because of that. I am not sure why. We may, in my machines, I may have SRIOV capable adapters in a virtual I/O server, but I think they're not set up. It doesn't like that idea. Maybe we should raise a PMR and try and get that fixed. That, if you have it, but it's not switched on, well, don't try and get the stats off it, which is what the problem we're thinking in here. And we also got some people picky about their the JSON format from the HMC, and I think this is particularly saying about the entitlement of logical partitions. And so the HMC, if all your partitions are exact whole numbers, of the entitlement is 1, 2, 3, or 4, then it reports it as an integer. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, or 4. If, however, some of those LPARs are like 1.5 or 1 3/4 entitlement, CPU's entitlement, then it reports back floating point. Now, unfortunately, InfluxDB does not like that. If the first time you inject into new data, this nextract data, and they'll all look like integers, it will make it as an integer in the database. If you then try and insert a floating point number, it said, no, that won't fit. If they were all to start off with floating point numbers, then it will make them floating point, and you can put an integer into a floating point. It just puts a .0 at the end, if you like. So some people were failing, some people weren't. So I actually fixed the nextract script to force all integers to be floating point numbers, so we can't get into this problem. So that one at least is fixed. But these problems aren't my problem. There's nothing much I can do if the HMC is not happy to supply your data, and we need to collect those error messages. Do send them to me, and then perhaps collectively we'll try and work out are some of them we can fix. Maybe the SRIOV adapters need loopback adapters in the ports or something, and maybe that will make the problem go away. Or we can try and get them to say, okay, it's not set up, don't try and get the data, and don't report an error if you can't get it. The data off the SRIOV will just take the rest of the data without those stats, or assume zeros or something. Okay, now we're heading towards the TechU, the Technical University. These are the big IBM conferences. This one is going to be a virtual one, as you imagine. Nobody wants to get together and breathe over each other. So I'm actually running an AIX Performance Tuning lab. We're working with SkyTap in the virtual environment. We're in the computer room. We can get you onto our IBM machines, but this time we're using the cloud-based virtual machines from SkyTap. We really like those guys because they're providing access to them for free for a little bit of advertising. So there's the advertising done, and we'll say more on the day. Here's actually SkyTap. These are the virtual machines, and you can just click on the run button here, and it will power up your virtual machine and run it for you. And these ones are running, and I'm going to allow people to log on to different, well, they're not real machines, they're virtual machines, to do some AIX performance sort of starter pack, sort of basic. And the tool they're going to use to do the monitoring is nmon. So I'm happy to do that. The actual content was Michelle Passat actually wrote the actual lab. So I'm using that, changing it a bit because we're using Power 8 this time. Last time we did it in America as a local face-to-face conference, and we were using Power 9 over in my lab. Okay, now so that's nmon, that's why it's got a mention in there. At the TechU, I'm also running an nmon graphing lab. So this will allow you to log into a Grafana system in which there's AIX data in the InfluxDB, and then you can go and start graphing that data. So we're going to all log into one machine running Grafana, and you can create all sorts of lines and pie charts and single stand text boxes, selecting virtual machines, and grouping with variable resources. They are, we've got memory, but there's only one set of memory in there, changing size. But if you've got CPUs, there could be one or more CPUs, or disks, there could be one or more networks and file systems and those sorts of. That's what I call the variable resources. We group those together, and Grafana will just find out how many there are and put that many lines on the graph automatically for you, rather than you having to draw, disk stats for disk 1, disk 2, and carry on until you get to disk 200 or whatever you got on your machine. So here's some of the graphs. I'm doing a practice session. I'm watching it in the corner here with a bit of nmon, and that allows me to see how much CPU we're going to take. It's going to be fun because these are virtual machines in cloud, and we might find that when we try pressing it very hard, we're going to see the machines go very busy because they're using shared resources. In SkyTap, if you want to get more physical CPU, your entitlement rather, higher, you have to put in more memory, which seems a bit odd to me. But that's what you do if you want to actually claim more CPU hardware under the covers. But anyway, another little topic here, Power Devops. I love these guys because they're doing me a really big favor. They take InfluxDB, the latest version there. Apart from they have a cloud version running at 2.0 if you want as well. And Grafana, this is the latest version, although I think I've just seen literally yesterday that Grafana's gone to 7.2. I'm sure the Power DevOps guys will go and compile that for us. The nice thing that they're doing then, normally those two tools, they're compiled by their vendors for AMD 64. But of course, I want to run it on my power boxes. I've got lots of power, big, powerful power boxes. And so they compile it for Red Hat 7 and 8, SLES, SUSE Enterprise Linux 15, the same version, same version. And they compile it for AIX. We'll come back to that in a minute. If we go here, if you go to these places, you can download it for your AMD 64, your Intel type machines. For various flavors of Linux, which is Red Hat and SUSE and Ubuntu, and I think there's a bunch more. Oh, and if you really want to, Macs, that should be Apple Mac down in here. I'll change that when I put the handouts out. So Mac OS and even Windows if you want. Now, I don't recommend running this server sort of software because you want it to be running all the time as a service. Mac OS, spelled it wrong, that's classic, and Microsoft Windows, of course, you tend to shut those down at night, for example, and then the data will just get thrown away. So you don't want to do that. Unless you're doing a prototype and you just want to experiment on your local workstation just to give it a go. But apart from downloading it from the two different places, it all installs and it gets set up, and it doesn't take more than 15 minutes to do that. Even when I was learning SkyTap, it didn't take me maybe 20 minutes because I was learning things about SkyTap as I went along. So it's good to have a real project to try these things out, to learn them properly. So it's very quick to get InfluxDB and Grafana up on your AMD 64 or on your Power software hardware to get all the software available to you. Right now, new since last time, I think we had InfluxDB last time, but now the Power DevOps guys are compiling it for AIX for both of them. So it's AIX 7.2 TL3 or above. We've actually got TL4 out now and TL5 at the end of the year, but that's fine. So we can use TL4 if you want to. I haven't tried this myself. I did actually try the InfluxDB very early on, but in those days it wasn't in installp format, so you had to move. It was only like a dozen files into the right places in the startup. Configuration files, the defaults will all work fine. but it was a bit more of a hand crank. Now we have an install P to just put it straight into your copy of AIX. Generally, we don't put open source software in the same places as you do on Linux. We like to put it in opt freeware to keep the AIX operating system away from the extra packages, the applications. It's good practice. In Linux, they tend to stick them in the same old places as where all the Linux code is sitting, and then it can be difficult to disengage or work out what belongs to what. But anyway, that's enough of that. So if you're running njmon and you're trying to run InfluxDB and Grafana on AIX, then you'll also need Python 3. Well, that's okay. We've got Python 3. It's available in the AIX toolbox. Install yum, and then you can do yum install Python 3, and it will just pull it all down. And if you want to import JSON from your AIX machine, you could use a Linux machine if you liked. But if you want to do it directly from your Power machine, then you'll also have to get the InfluxDB Python client module to do that, because out of the tools that we're using, we use that particular module. If you're using nimon, this is the one that outputs the InfluxDB line protocol instead of JSON, then it is pushing the data from your AIX or Linux straight into InfluxDB. So there's no need to have any Python in that case. Although Python's fun. I quite enjoy writing and learning about Python. If you're doing this, of course, on AIX, it's now load and go, and then you have the luxury and flexibility of AIX. For my case, I'm running Red Hat on Power, and it's running out of this space, and I'm trying to rack my brains about, can I extend the logical volume, or do I have to extend the file system on top, and can I find a new disks and bring it into a volume group? I don't know if I've got volume groups. All a bit of a mess. On AIX, I know exactly where I am. I can just add another disk to a volume group, or then does it say expand the file system, and off we go. Or even take the InfluxDB into a separate file system, because it's just a mount point in user var, I think it is. Okay, and then we're off and going, and we have the luxury of AIX. I think that's the way I'll actually move to, because I'm just more familiar with AIX and the luxurious flexibility we have with AIX. Okay, that's it for this session. We're just over the half hour. The next meeting is in early November. I found by experience in these 4 meetings that the first Monday of the month is not a good place to have these meetings, because everybody, particularly managers, want to have lots of webinars on the first Monday of the month. And then we actually had 2 holidays in America, I think, on those 2 Mondays as well. So maybe we'll move to the Tuesdays or Wednesdays. If you have an opinion, maybe the second Monday of the month might be better, and then maybe a clear gap. If you've got an opinion, let me know. Here's my contact details. And this is no change in here, but from my contact details, you can get in touch. Okay, now I'm just going to quickly check the chat. Check the chat. I'm finding it difficult to get that out. Oh, Gareth's there. Yeah, he's reminding us that the RSCT is the reliable, scalable cluster technology on which the VIO server is talking to the HMC. Okay, and yeah, we covered that already. You could probably work out how to restart that if necessary. If it won't restart, then definitely raise a PMR, because you need that sorted out. And you shouldn't be fiddling about on your VIO servers without the support guys telling you exactly what you need, or them having to do some investigation. So that's it for this time. There's not many people online, unless they're going to leap in with a voice question. We're going to stop there in a couple of seconds. I know Jack Miller's a famous guy. He's he worked for Mid-Range Performance Group they're now Help Systems, and he does a lot of compiling of nmon for 5,000 flavors of or something like that of Linux for me. So he's a thoroughly good guy. Welcome aboard, Jack. He gets in contact every now and again, so I'm sure he hasn't got a question. So I'm going to close the recording there to keep it small. If it slowly pops down. Okay. Stop.